is unfortunate. They were pretty vicious about it. It was, again, it probably went in hand with one of the reasons why it didn't do very well, upon its initial release. But thankfully, again, because of the home video market, as I mentioned, it was able to find a following, and it's considered one of the, I would argue that it's considered one of the best horror movies ever made. The iconic final scene, the iconic final line of the movie was where MacReady says, "Why don't we just wait here for a little while and see what happens?" And that was not written initially. That was thought up by Kurt Russell. And again, this kind of goes in hand with when a director deals with actors that they've dealt with before or worked with before. I imagine they develop a bit of a trust, and they give them a little bit of a leeway with their characters to form their characters. They also worked together to form a bit of a backstory, which wasn't real clear when you see the movie, but it makes sense when you find out about it later that apparently the lead character was a former Vietnam vet who's suffering from PTSD. And when you watch the movie, there are some scenes like how he mentions he's a real light sleeper, things like that kind of makes sense once you find that out. I should also point out that there's not a film sequel, but in 2011 they made a prequel. And I can say that, honestly, it's not a horrible movie. The acting was good. It was okay. The story was pretty interesting. I'll say the acting wasn't good enough to the point where I actually remember any of the actors who were in it. And its biggest problem was that it relied way too heavy on computer-generated effects. Whereas one of the things that the original movie was most known for was its practical effects. That's one of the reasons it looks so well, it looks so good, and one of the reasons it just aged so well is the effects are amazing. If you ever talk to somebody who is singing the praises of practical effects, this is what they're talking about. The Thing is amazing. And for a sequel a prequel to go in a completely opposite direction, yeah, I can see how a lot of people would hold a grudge against that. There was a bit of a sequel. There is kind of a sequel. There was a video game which was pretty good, but a little confusing because I remember playing, a big part of the movie was that characters who kind of you didn't see a while, who disappeared, who went somewhere else or were off screen, they always had the potential when they came back, they were not human anymore. And the biggest problem I always had with the game, while it was a lot of fun, was that you had characters that were with you the entire time who never went anywhere, and yet they all of a sudden became the Thing. So logically, it made no sense. There was also a comic book series released in 1991 by Dark Horse Comics, and it continued. The initial two-part two issues occurred 24 hours after the events of the original movie, and I believe there were subsequent miniseries after that, but to be honest, from what I remember, the artwork and the writing was really poor, so I would not recommend bothering to seek those out. Now, there are a lot of interesting theories about this movie. In particular, there are a lot of theories, to say, very interesting theories, and I love theories about movies. I love fan theories about movies. I talked a bunch about past episodes, so I will continue that tradition by talking about this movie. Now, something you should also know, along with Kurt Russell, this was pretty much a who's who. It had a lot of very well-known actors, and it had Wilford Brimley, it had Keith David. Just had an exceptional cast of actors that were either pretty famous at the time or eventually, became pretty famous. One of them was actor Keith David, who is an amazing actor and has just this velvety smooth voice. It's really amazing. He's actually done a lot of voiceover work. I know that, in fact, for several video games he's done it. It's just, once you hear his voice, it's just very memorable. Anyway, he plays a character named Childs. He actually was not originally the first actor considered for that role either. Such actors like Ernie Hudson and Carl Weathers, who was very popular at the time, were considered, but eventually the role went to Keith David, and I think he did a remarkable job because he has, and not to say anything bad about Ernie Hudson or Carl Weathers, but Keith David has a certain intensity about him that was just perfect for this role. He was able just to convey the stress and the paranoia of the situation, just fantastic. There are several, as I mentioned, there are several theories, and one of them was that, and this has sort of been debunked depending on who you talk to, but one of the theories, and again, this is getting into heavy spoiler areas, so if you don't like spoilers, I kind of encourage, or you're worried about things maybe ruining it, this you might not want to listen to. But one of the theories was that you look at the character's eyes and you see a glint of light in their eyes. That means that they're human. If they don't have the glint, they're not. Another theory is that at the end of the movie, the Childs, or leading into that theory, at the end of the movie, Childs and the McCready character, played by Kurt Russell and Keith David, are the lone survivors. They're out in the cold, and they're sharing a bottle, and that's when McCready says that line, why don't we just wait here for a little while and see what happens? Now, there have been a lot of theories about this. One theory was that when McCready hands the drink to Keith David's character, that it's not actually alcohol, it's gasoline, because he wants to see if the character is actually, human or not. My theory is that neither of the characters are human. And let me tell you why. From early on in the movie, when the dog first shows up to the base, it licks a character. And the basic theory about how the thing is transferred, or how it's able to sample people's DNA, is through saliva or contact. And the dog licks the face of this guy, which gets him infected. And then he is later seen drinking and sharing out of the same bottle that McCready is drinking out of, which would technically mean he gets infected. And Childs, again, there's not really one scene, but he disappears for a certain point later on in the movie. And like I mentioned earlier, in this movie, characters that kind of disappear, or you don't see them for a while, good things don't happen to them. So my theory is that both characters are the Thing. And what's important about this is, if you think about it, from the opening scene of the movie, you see a ship crash. And I was thinking about that. The Thing, I could be wrong here, but this is my theory anyway. I don't think this character has a hive mind, and I think that every thing is its own individual creature, in that they don't have a shared consciousness. So they're actually very competitive and out for for their own interests, and are fully happy with having everyone killed. And there are two. Another thing, again, slight spoiler warnings. There are two things in this movie. The first is the dog, and then the second is when they go to the Norwegian base, they find another thing in the frozen ice that escapes from that. So kind of my theory, and it's not really solely mine, because I've seen different versions of this online and people discuss, is that those two things are actually competing against each other throughout the course of the movie, and are somehow not able to tell that they're not able to recognize another thing. So at the end of the movie, one of the reasons that neither character wants to fight is because they realize if they just sit there and freeze, eventually they'll be fought out, and whoever finds them down the line, and they can continue doing what they're doing. Individually, they do not recognize the other is a thing. They both think that. They both think their plan is both to just sit and wait and let the other guy, who they think is human, just perish due to the cold. So they're not willing to jeopardize their safety by getting into a fight. Anyway, that's my theory. I don't know if it's sound or not, but who knows. I think I've probably rambled on long enough, but I wanted to, again, thank you. I've tried something a little different. Usually my shows are about 15 minutes long, and this one is probably going to be about 40 longer. So I guess that happens when you ramble on a little bit. But hopefully I provided some interesting points. Hopefully you enjoy it. I highly recommend this movie. It is amazing. It's one of the movies that you notice things. You have to watch it repeated numerous times to pick up on anything. Oh, and that is one thing I will point out about the prequel, that the CGI might have been horrible, but you could tell that they had respect for the original source material, because things that show up, like there's a scene when they go to in the original movie, when they go to the Norwegian base, they find an axe lodged in the wall. In the prequel, you find out how that axe got into the wall, and it's actually in the exact spot it would have been in the movie. So you can tell that they were respectful of the source material, which I certainly applaud them for, because that's always nice. That, you're respecting the source material, and because of that, you're also respecting the fans. From a continuity standpoint, I applaud them for that. But that's no excuse for CGI. Anyway, I've ranted on and on enough. Hopefully you enjoyed this. Hopefully, let me know. Did you like this format, or do you think I should just kind of be a little more brief and go back to just reading from a script? Let me know. My email address is, and this is all one word, forrealloganholmes@gmail.com. Again, I want to thank you for taking the time to let me talk to you, and hopefully I've told you some things you may not have known about the movie, or maybe inspired you to go see it for the first time. Anyway, I'm Logan Holmes. This is Logan Holmes Watches, and you've been listening to Radio KR.